On Hitler's map, the Eastern Front still had a shape. A red grease pencil line ran from the Baltic down through Poland, as if an army were still standing there. But the line was lying. By the autumn of 1944, many of the German divisions marked on that map had become names more than forces. Some had lost the infantry that made them divisions. Some had tanks with no fuel. Some had headquarters still sending reports for units that could no longer hold a road junction, much less a front. Heinz Guderian knew it. He had been made chief of the Army General Staff after the July 1944 crisis, and by then he was reading the returns that never looked clean enough for the briefing table. He saw the numbers behind the symbols. He saw formations that existed in ink, not in strength. But inside the wolf's lair at Rostenburg, deep in the East Prussian forest, the war was still being explained as if the right order could repair it. Keitel was there, Jodl was there, men who had learned the most dangerous skill in Hitler's headquarters, how to tell the truth in a form that did not explode in the room. They did not always invent, often they selected. A division was mentioned, its missing battalions were not. A planned counterattack was marked. The fuel it required was treated like a detail. Enemy losses were emphasized. German replacement shortages were softened, delayed, or buried in a secondary paper nobody wanted to read aloud. The result was not a clean lie. It was worse. It was a map that looked military, sounded official, and concealed the one thing Hitler most needed to understand. Germany was no longer fighting the war on the same scale as its enemies. In the late 1930s, German planners had built their expectations around short wars. Poland collapsed quickly. France lasted 46 days. The lesson Hitler wanted to remember was simple. Strike fast enough, and industrial depth never gets its turn. But by 1944, the United States had been at war for nearly 3 years, and it had not slowed down. It had expanded. American factories were turning out aircraft, trucks, landing craft, artillery shells, radios, spare engines, uniforms, fuel drums, and replacement parts in quantities Germany could not match, and more importantly, could not imagine tactically defeating. American shipyards were launching vessels faster than U-boats could erase them from the sea lanes. American training systems were feeding men into units faster than German intelligence could update its depleted order of battle. American depots behind the front had become a second battlefield, one Germany could not reach. None of that fit neatly on the situation map, so the map kept showing lines, and Hitler kept issuing orders to the lines. By December 1944, the same distortion had become a plan. The Ardennes offensive was built on a gamble so large that even its commanders could see the hole in it before the first shot was fired. Army Group B would attack through an 85-mile stretch of forest and winter roads. Darkness and fog would hide the movement from Allied aircraft. German armor would break through, race west, seize fuel dumps, cross the Meuse, and push toward Antwerp. If the blow split the Allied armies, Hitler believed the Western coalition might crack. To him, the American army was powerful but brittle. That belief had evidence, if you chose the right evidence. The Americans had moved carefully in Italy. The Normandy breakout had taken longer than expected. In the autumn, German units had sometimes held against opponents with more tanks and more aircraft. So Hitler saw what confirmed the old lesson. Hit hard enough, fast enough, at the right seam, and the enemy would break. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding on the ground, saw the other part, the fuel arithmetic. German armored spearheads did not have enough fuel to complete the operation unless they captured American depots nearly intact in the first 48 hours. If those depots were destroyed, defended, or simply missed, the offensive would not merely slow, it would stop on the road. Model said so, Others understood it. Guderian, watching the Eastern Front, argued that the Panzer reserves being fed into the West were the very reserves Germany would need when the Soviets moved again. Hitler rejected the warning. The West, he insisted, would decide everything. On November 16, 1944, 3 German armies came out of the Ardennes in fog and snow. For the first hours, the map seemed to vindicate Hitler. American units were overrun. 2 regiments of the 106th Infantry Division were captured. Roads jammed. Reports broke down. The front bulged open across miles of forest. German columns pushed through villages that Allied commanders had considered quiet. For 72 hours, the war in the West appeared to have changed. Then a road town became more important than the whole plan: Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division was rushed in by truck, not dropped from the sky like legend often remembers it. Men arrived cold, under-equipped, some without proper winter clothing, into a town that controlled 7 roads. 7 roads mattered because the German plan was not just a battle plan, it was a timetable, and every timetable needed Bastogne. Without Bastogne, German columns could not spread cleanly. Without the roads, fuel trucks could not keep up. Without fuel, the Panzer spearheads became steel roadblocks, waiting to be found from the air. The Germans surrounded the town and demanded surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe answered with one word: nuts. The word became famous, but the real damage was not the insult. The real damage was time. Every hour Bastogne held, the German offensive spent fuel it could not replace. Every hour the weather remained closed, the Americans used the roads behind the line to move men, ammunition, and armor. Every hour German planners waited for the American front to fracture, it instead thickened. This was the part the German briefing culture had failed to measure. American units could be hit hard and still recover. They could lose men and still be refilled. They could lose vehicles and still be re-equipped. They could lose time and still move faster than German assumptions allowed. By December 23rd, the weather began to clear. The sky, which had protected the German attack, turned against it. American aircraft struck roads, columns, bridges, and supply traffic. On December 26th, Patton's Third Army broke through to Bastogne after a rapid pivot north. The German spearheads still had not reached the Meuse. The fuel depots they needed were still largely in American hands. The offensive had not split the Allies. It had spent Germany's last mobile strength in the West. And in the East, the real blow was already forming. On January 9, 1945, Guderian carried a folder into Hitler's briefing that should have ended the illusion. It came from the Eastern Front intelligence apparatus under Reinhard Gehlen. It was not a rumor sheet. It was a consolidated assessment built from prisoner interrogations, aerial reconnaissance, signals intelligence, and battlefield reporting. It showed Soviet strength massing along the Vistula, not as a vague danger, not as propaganda, as a count. Zhukov's first Belarusian front, Konev's first Ukrainian front. Massed artillery, tank armies, infantry concentrations, supply movement, bridgehead buildup. The figures showed that the Soviet advantage was overwhelming, roughly 5-1 in infantry in broad terms, and in key armored sectors even worse for the Germans. Guderian put the numbers in front of Hitler. Hitler dismissed them as fantasy. Not wrong, not uncertain, fantasy. That word mattered because it revealed the system. By January 1945, the most accurate information in the German command structure could reach the table and still be rejected if it made the map morally impossible. Hitler did not need better paper. He needed a reality he would accept. 3 days later, on January 12th, Konev attacked from the Brno bridgehead. Within 2 days, his forces had driven more than 40 miles. German divisions that still appeared as organized blocks on maps were smashed before they could report what was happening. Defensive lines did not bend, they broke open. The old front, drawn with care, became empty space. On January 14th, Zhukov struck. Army Group A began to come apart. This time, the map could not hide it. The briefing charts in Berlin started showing something Hitler's headquarters had spent years avoiding. Gaps. Not salients, not threatened sectors. Gaps. Places where no German formation existed to mark. Guderian called for reserves. He pressed for releases. He demanded that forces be moved east. But the reserves Hitler had counted on were not really reserves anymore. Some had been burned in the Ardennes. Some were still refitting in the west. Some existed as unit names without strength. Some had vehicles but no fuel. Some had orders but no roads clear enough to obey them. The war of ink had run into the war of material, and material won. By January 17th, Soviet forces entered Warsaw. By January 19th, Krakow fell. East Prussia was cut off. German civilians, told by internal propaganda that the front remained controlled, began moving west in freezing columns. Families dragged carts through snow. Wehrmacht stragglers moved among them. Horses collapsed. Engines stalled. Temperatures dropped below -20°C in places, and the road itself became a report more honest than any briefing. The front was not holding. It was passing over them. Inside the chancellery, the ritual continued. Maps came in, units were marked, orders were issued. Hold here, counterattack there. Transfer this formation, relieve that city, restore this line. But the men in the room now understood something they rarely said aloud. The orders were being given to an army that no longer matched the symbols. That is what made January 1945 different. Before then, the map had distorted the war. After January, the map began documenting its own failure. By March, Albert Speer no longer needed a battlefield map to know the war was finished. He needed production figures. On March 15, 1945, Speer carried a 9-page memorandum into the Reich Chancellery. As Minister of Armaments, he knew what German industry could still do and what it no longer could. For 3 years, he had helped sustain weapons output under bombing through dispersal, improvisation, slave labor, and ruthless prioritization. He also knew the final load-bearing supports were gone. Silesia had been lost in the Soviet January offensive. That mattered because Silesia was not simply territory, it was coal. It was steel. It was industrial feedstock. It was the material base under the weapons Hitler was still ordering into existence. Speer's memorandum did not say that production was strained. It said the economic basis for continuing the war no longer existed. That sentence should have ended the machinery of fantasy. Instead, 4 days later, Hitler issued the Nero Decree. Bridges, transport networks, factories, utilities, and industrial infrastructure inside Germany were to be destroyed before they could fall into Allied hands. The order meant that if Germany could not win, Germany's own remaining ability to live after defeat should be burned. Speer later worked quietly to prevent parts of that order from being carried out. He contacted commanders and officials. He argued that destruction served no military purpose. He was still serving the regime while trying to obstruct one of its final commands. Even collapse had become double-booked. Officially, Germany was still obeying. Practically, men inside the system were choosing which orders not to execute. In the West, the same pattern appeared on the Rhine. On March 7th, American troops from the 9th Armored Division reached the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen and found it still standing. That should not have happened, but the men on the ground did not wait for perfect permission. They crossed. They seized the opportunity before German demolition could finish the job. Within days, multiple American divisions were over the Rhine. Hitler's response was not to rethink the Western defense. It was to punish the men associated with the bridge's survival. Officers were court-martialed, several were executed, but the bridge itself was no longer the point. Even after it collapsed from damage days later, American engineers had built pontoon crossings. The breach was no longer a single bridge, it was a front. The map could mark the Rhine as a barrier. American engineers treated it as a problem. That was the difference. By late March, Guderian's position had become impossible. He continued arguing for withdrawals, shorter lines, and a coherent eastern defense. Hitler wanted counterattacks from formations that could not assemble. On March 28th, after a final confrontation, Guderian was relieved. His replacement, Hans Krebs, was not chosen because the facts had improved. He was chosen because the briefing still needed a man to present them. April 1945 became the purest form of the system. The German command machine was still producing orders, but the war was no longer responding. Army Group Vistula appeared on paper as a formation. In the field, it was fragments. 9th Army was ordered to move toward Berlin, though it was being encircled. 12th Army was ordered to turn east while still facing American forces on the Elbe. Units acknowledged radio messages and then did whatever the actual terrain, fuel, ammunition, and enemy pressure allowed. Orders traveled farther than authority. The machinery of command still had voice. The machinery of war had lost obedience. Inside German cities, soldiers were surrendering faster than reports could capture. Roads filled with civilians, refugees, prisoners, rear area troops, Volkssturm men, and vehicles with no fuel left. A military system built on command certainty had entered a world where local survival decided more than headquarters did. And still, beneath Berlin, the maps were updated. On April 22, 1945, Hitler attended what became his last full military conference. The room was in the Führerbunker, below the Reich Chancellery Garden. Soviet artillery could be heard from above. Zhukov's forces were inside Berlin's outer defensive zone. Konyev's forces were closing from the south. In some sectors, the front was less than 10 miles from the room where the front was being discussed. Krebs presented the situation. The key issue was Steiner. SS General Felix Steiner's detachment had been ordered to attack south and cut into Zhukov's advance. On the map, it still had a function. In reality, Steiner did not have the strength to carry out the order. He had reported as much. The report had reached Berlin, but the order had not changed. It had merely been repeated. When Hitler was told that Steiner's attack had not happened and would not happen, the final illusion broke in the room. Witnesses later described the scene in similar terms. Hitler ordered most people out. He raged against betrayal, failure, cowardice, and the collapse of everything he had believed would still obey him. For hours, the briefing stopped being a military conference and became a reckoning with a reality that had been moving toward that room for months. He declared the war lost. He said he would remain in Berlin. He said he would die there. Then the military routine resumed. New orders were issued. Armies that could not move were directed to move. Positions that could not be held were ordered held. The map received one more performance. 8 days later, on April 30th, Hitler killed himself in the Führerbunker. That same day, the Soviet flag was raised over the Reichstag. Germany signed surrender at Reims on May 7th and ratified it in Berlin on May 8th. Only after the war did the accounting become impossible to deny. Between 1941 and 1945, the United States produced roughly 297,000 military aircraft. Germany produced roughly 119,000 across the same period.
But even that comparison understates the crisis, because aircraft without trained pilots were only numbers, and by 1944, Germany was losing experienced pilots faster than it could train replacements. Aviation fuel shortages were gutting the training pipeline at the exact moment Allied air power was expanding. American wartime shipbuilding produced thousands of vessels. Liberty ships, once measured in long construction cycles, were being delivered at extraordinary speed by 1943. German U-boat commanders could sink tonnage, but they could not sink it faster than Allied industry replaced it. Silesia, the industrial region Speer identified as essential, was lost in the January offensive that Galen's assessment had warned was coming. The Ardennes had consumed fuel and armored reserves against an American army that did not break. The Vistula-Oder offensive had torn open the east, with the reserves gone or hollow. The Remagen crossing had proved that even geography could no longer be trusted to buy time, and the April bunker conference proved the final truth. The generals had softened the briefings to survive Hitler. The softened briefings helped Hitler continue decisions that spent the remaining fuel, men, formations, bridges, and time. The attempt to manage reality did not save the room. It extended the war outside it. The German military dead across the war are estimated in the millions, with catastrophic losses falling in the period after Germany's strategic outcome had already become clear in production records, intelligence estimates, fuel shortages, and collapsing fronts. That is the cost hidden inside the polite version of a briefing. Not one false sentence, not one wrong line on a map. A whole command culture that learned to make catastrophe presentable. On January 9, 1945, Guderian brought Hitler a folder that contained the closest thing to the full picture anyone in that room had offered him in years. It showed what was coming. It showed where it was coming. It showed what Germany no longer had the strength to stop. Hitler called the figures fantasy. 3 days later, the fantasy attacked, and the red line on the map finally met the army it had been pretending to hold back.